my student evaluation scores will once again someday land me unemployed. I wish that wasn't a fear in my life. So let's get into student evaluations. So the two components to a student evaluation, the first of them would be a grading system, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. 1 through 5 is pretty standard in all colleges that I've been affiliated with. And then the other component of student evaluations are comments. There will be specific prompting questions that will ask students to look at specific aspects of the pedagogy or the professor or different things, and then they will be asked to comment on those. The comments are really important to me. I think administrators tend to look at the numbers, though. As studies have shown, again and again, women tend to be scored lower, and that if we're going to be trying to be fair across the board, the easiest thing to do would just to add on like 0.7, it looks like, to a woman's feedback scores. So we're going to start off looking at the scores that I got at my first tenure track position. I didn't take the time. I found my old tenure packet, and remember, I was denied tenure at this school, but I still had the packet, and this is the numbers that I came up with. Thinking about my student ratings from the job that I lost, my first faculty position that was a small liberal arts college and a tenure track position. I didn't want to delve too far into it. I did find my old tenure packet, and so I was able to find some summaries that I had made of my teaching through the years. This again is evaluating my teaching of anatomy and physiology, which I thought was good to compare apples to apples here, and just to kind of look how I've done with this particular class through the years. Here we have my first year, my second year, things were going really well. My ratings were between 4 and 5. I had a strong dip here to below 3, it looks like, actually, and it came back up to 4 and then back down to 3.5. This was actually the semester after the school year after I had my first baby, after I had my first child. And remember, I did not have a maternity leave at the school, and I really should have insisted on it. You can just see plain as day that things were just not going well in that direction. And that would be, quite honestly, the primary reason why this worked out this way. I guess the second of the series of this class where things were going pretty well, around 4, above 4, and we actually brought it back to 4 afterwards. However, yep, that 1 year was a real bummer there, a really hard time getting it together and trying to keep it together for my students and giving them a good experience in the classroom. Apparently, it was not a good time for them. My scores dipped for sure. I will say, though, as I said in another video, that my ratings were still, they weren't, 1s and 2s. They were still above 3. I look at this year as the year that they kind of point to, I'm guessing, because they decided not to award me tenure, and the reason they told me that I wasn't given tenure was because in some semesters my student ratings were not up to par. I'm assuming that the year that they're talking about is this one here, the 2009-2010 school year, and it's not entirely fair to say, that a person who's having, I don't know, even though I had a newborn baby and I had many, many, many other responsibilities in my work life, I still had scores above 3. I don't know what anybody really considers to be a poor score, but I can tell you that the department average was around in this area as well. So those are the scores that I'm sharing from my first job, and I guess this was the reason, this dip here in this one school year was the reason why they decided that I was not going to be awarded tenure and continue my job. My next set of scores comes from the community college that I taught for about 4 years part-time in between my full-time jobs. So my first tenure track job, I was denied tenure. Then I spent the next 4 years at home with my kids. My kids were quite young, and so it kind of worked out that it wasn't my choice for this to happen, but at the same time, it worked out. I was able to spend a lot of time with my kids when they were very young, and maybe sometimes things happen for a reason. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't waste my time. I was always teaching part-time in the evenings, on the weekends. So my husband would go to work, and then when he came home, I would go to work, which was exhausting, but at the same time, I was developing my course as best I could. I knew moving forward that if I was ever going to get another job, that it was probably going to be teaching anatomy and physiology. I wanted to make sure my pedagogy was as good as possible at moving forward with this class. So I worked really hard. This was the time that I started really changing the way that I taught. This is the first time I started changing the way that I taught. So this is from the community college that I taught at for a few years. This was one of the very last semesters that I taught there. I randomly selected, I've saved a lot of my course evaluations through the years, so I just basically selected one of the later ones just to give you an idea. I did not preview any of these. This is a pretty flattering one, but I did not preview any of these before selecting it. Truth be told, this is actually a pretty typical set of scores for me. So you'll remember that 1 is needs improvement and 5 is excellent. So you'll notice that my instructions, my scores are always between 4 and 5. And then when you come down here, you'll see the N of 17. So I probably had about 20 students left in the class, and 17 of them. So this is a class that had a cap of 24. Typically by the end of the semester, I would have maybe 20 or 21 students in the class. And it was typical that about 17 or, in the high teens number of students would take these course evaluations. So this is what it looks like. The instructor clearly and completely presented course objectives, strongly agree, or always, and then neutral. The instructor clearly and completely presented the grading procedure. The instructor provides assignments and tests related to course objectives. The instructor is available to help students with course difficulties. This is typically one that I score a little bit lower on. I need to work a little bit more on making myself more available. This was information that I was taking in at this time. The instructor maintains scheduled office hours. I certainly did not. I actually didn't have any office hours at all at this school. So you can see that a part-time instructor is not required to do office hours, but still students were saying, I strongly agree, or that definitely happened. It certainly did not happen. So there were some people who just always give 5s no matter what. Mixed results here for the instructors organized. Some people said nope, not really organized at all. And some people, most people said definitely. The instructor is prepared for each class. Strongly agree, I suppose, with that. What else we got? The instructor begins class on time, ends class on time, maintains an order and an appropriate classroom atmosphere. It's a pretty high score there. That's nice. The instructor provides the opportunity for students to ask questions, makes an effort to maintain student interest, speaks clearly and understandably. Assignments and tests are graded and returned in a reasonable time period. This is quite important to students. This is not a small thing. I actually sometimes return exams same day. In fact, I usually return exams same day. I do design my exams so that it's pretty easy for me to correct them quickly. And then I can return them right away. It takes a lot of effort to design a good exam that really, takes in the students, what the students should be learning, the learning outcomes, and then produces something that allows me to correct it quickly. But I do that, so there's that. And then kind of a breakdown of all the scores here. So this was at my part-time teaching gig. I definitely had, some work to do still at this point, but overall my scores were very good. I think most professors would be happy with scores that are solidly in the 4 to 5 area. So I ended up now at Carthage, where my primary job is teaching anatomy and physiology, as expected. I have a couple of advantages at this school, and it's been a really good fit for me. Because one of the advantages that I have is that I have come in with literally, 15 years experience teaching this course by the time I started there. And the other aspect of what's been a good fit for me at Carthage is that the community there is really tight. And so students will have the opportunity, when they're taking my class, they'll have the opportunity to talk to students in other years ahead of them who will say, oh, you're taking Wenzel's class, make sure that you're paying attention. Or, yeah, it won't make sense to you right now what she's teaching you, but it will come out down the line. Like, so it's helpful for students to understand why I do what I do. It's helpful to have that sense of community there. So it works out pretty well. So here are my scores for Carthage. I had 2 sections that I was teaching in the spring of this year, and I went ahead and just selected one of them at random. I wasn't trying to choose anything. There's a lot of good information that Carthage gives you about your student evaluations. Look at this one. The number of classes I missed this semester. So I actually selected, of course, the second semester of my 2-semester class because this, so I had, as you can see, I had 26 students left in the class by the end of the semester, and 23 of them filled out the student evaluations. And then there's some really good information here. The number of classes I missed, by the second semester, we do not have a lot of absences. It's actually surprising that we had 3 students missing 3 to 4 classes. In the first semester, we have lots of issues with attendance. And by the second semester, let's just say that a lot of those issues have resolved themselves. And by the second semester, students have basically learned that they have to come to class. So very few misses. 9 students literally missed 0 classes at all. 10 students missed 1 to 2 classes. That's pretty typical second semester. Let's see, in a typical week, the number of hours I spent working on this class outside of this course outside of class were, well, there were students who spent more than 7 hours working on the class. That's not ideal. You don't want students working on your class for, like it's basically a part-time job. They have other classes, so that's something I have to think about. I have to think about the workload that students are taking on. To be honest with you, this is probably where I want students to land, and thankfully this is where the majority of them land, at 4 to 6 hours a week spent on this class. There are a significant number that are only spending 1 to 3 hours on the class. That also is definitely not ideal. Did I learn to think more clearly about the subject? Again, we have strongly agree, and then neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. This was a random selection. I didn't mean to. This is typical for my classes these days. They don't have a lot of complaints, especially in the second semester. By second semester, most of the students know what they're getting into. So I got lots of strongly agrees. The course was intellectually stimulating. The learning outcomes for this course were clearly outlined in the syllabus. Overall, I would rate my learning experience for this course. I had 1 neutral, but everybody else was excellent or good. The instructor presented the material clearly. The instructor used class time in a way that contributed to my learning. The instructor was enthusiastic. That's definitely, I always get high marks on that. I'm always excited to teach. That is a strong point for me. Look at this, a mean of 4.9. Hardly anybody disagrees with that. I am excited about this subject matter. Even after 20 years, I love it. I love teaching this class. The instructor respected student comments and questions. Now, this is one that I actually do have to work on still. You can see that I do have 1 student who disagreed with that. And that is something that, to be totally honest with you, I'm not always aware that I'm doing it, but I think there's something about my demeanor that is not welcoming comments and questions, and it's something I've worked on, a lot. This is one of the reasons why student evaluations are so good. I want to make sure that I'm doing this. You can see that there are 16 students who strongly agreed that I was open to suggestions and questions, but the fact that 1 student is still disagreeing is bad news for me. Like I still have work to do here. That's fine. Well, it's not fine. Like, it's not good. I don't want that student to feel so unhappy and like they weren't able to ask their question. That's sad. The instructor was willing to help students outside the classroom. Definitely, this is a strong point for me. Overall, I would rate the quality of instruction in this course. I'm all good or excellent on this point. So my means are always, in the high 4s. For over here, what we're looking at is comparisons, I think, with other biology classes. I'm not really sure what all this stuff is, but anyway, my
My number is there and their number is there, and everybody's doing well. Everybody's doing well in biology. Let's put it that way. Like that's a really good number. Science is hard. I'm proud of us. That's great.
And lastly, I wanted to take a look at Rate My Professor. When I first started learning about Rate My Professor, rumor had it that the highest rated professor on the whole website was this woman professor who gave all of her students A's and baked them cookies. Well, that's not my job. I don't bake cookies. I do actually bake cookies for my students sometimes. But anyway, um, it's not really my job to be sweet and grandmotherly towards them. It's my job to make sure they're not wasting their time here at my school. I'm giving them the best possible chance that I can to move forward. That is my job. Yeah, Rate My Professor has been something that at first it was awful reading terrible comments about myself, and over time I just, like, oh, I don't know, if they're mad about something. I will say that there is a nugget of truth in every comment, good or bad. I can always see, even if somebody's just clearly lashing out about something, I can always see the validity in what they're saying. So I'm not going to say that the comments about me that are bad are entirely false. It's probably, there's a truth to that. Again, they're not really representative of my actual student evaluation scores, but it is kind of helpful actually to get this feedback, and sometimes it's funny. If you're a woman teaching the sciences and you you look at your Rate My Professor scores, you're going to be developing a thick skin for some of the stuff that they say. It's like being publicly flogged. Like anybody can Google my name and look up my Rate My Professor scores, and there's nothing I can do about it. Like some of these things that are really embarrassing are just out there in the world. So some of my very worst scores aren't on there anymore. It turns out, I didn't know this, but I think they delete scores after that are more than 10 years old. So some of my very worst scores are no longer there. So what you'll see is something that's actually not, it doesn't actually look too bad.
So these are my Rate My Professor ratings, at least the ones that are still live. Again, anything older than 10 years, I just don't have access to it anymore. So at the top here, this was the first liberal arts school that I taught at where I was not awarded tenure. I actually have some pretty decent ratings here, but when I first started there, it was over 10 years ago, and so there's been some ratings on there that were actually lost over time. In the middle here, this was at the community college that I taught at part-time. I've got quite a lot of ratings here, actually. And then here, this is my current institution at Carthage, and yeah, lots and lots and lots of ratings. Holy cow, so many ratings. And this isn't even a school that has a particular culture for Rate My Professor. Like there are some schools where a lot of students really use RateMyProfessor.com a lot, and this doesn't seem to be one of them for the most part. But I have a lot of ratings on there. Wow, lots of opinions. I will note that, I don't know, the level of difficulty tends to be, kind of veering between 3 and 4. And I think that's fair. A lot of the ratings are actually 4. And I don't have a lot of ratings that are 5, like the most difficult, but a lot of ratings are at 4. And that's probably fair. I do teach a pretty difficult class, and I demand a lot of my students. So be that as it may, I'm not actually going through all the comments, but you can certainly you can certainly Google my Rate My Professor if you are so inclined. But here are the scores. These obviously are not representative of all of my students. It's just not true at all. When you look at my actual ratings, they tend to be between 4 and 5, and none of these are really there. Like that's not really something that there's a lot of unhappy students coming onto this website and talking about me. So I thought I would talk about one of the comments that I got anyway. I don't want to go through all of them, but I thought this one was actually kind of funny. First of all, level of difficulty 1, quality 1, very low, very low quality. How would you like to see that about yourself? Gosh, the student apparently was getting an F in my class. Let's see, what does it says? Honestly, one of the worst professors I've had, extremely disrespectful, doesn't care about students or well-being. Look at this. Her teaching methods are outdated as well as her wardrobe. Well, let's talk about that.
As a woman professor, appearance is a sore spot because you don't really want anyone commenting on your appearance at all. Not in a good way, not in a bad way. That is not why we are here. I tell my students, don't talk about my appearance. Don't talk about any of your professor's appearance. They used to actually have, in regular student evaluations, they used to have a pretty standard question, which was, I think it was commenting on professors' professional, like, do they appear to be professional looking? And I thought it just opens the floodgates for a bevy of rude comments, like either, again, overly flattering or overly offensive. And that's not really helpful. I don't like that. I don't like that we have to have our appearance discussed. The Rate My Professor website used to have a system of chili peppers. You could give your professor a chili pepper if you thought they were hot. Again, opening the floodgates, unnecessary comments. Quite honestly, if a professor shows up in, in an inappropriate clothing, then that's probably for their boss to discuss with them. It's really not up to 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds to comment on your physical appearance. It's just not important. It's not necessary. I hate it. Hate it.
So this is these are the Rate My Professor ratings. I've covered up the names, but these are 5 individuals in the same department with each other. This is not at my current school, but at a previous school that I used to teach at. And I happen to know all 5 people in this department pretty well. And so on the left hand side, we have the women in the department that I knew. And then on the right hand side, we have the 3 men in the department that I knew. All of these individuals teach similar classes. They teach, the basic freshman level classes in their major, and they all also teach upper level courses in their major that are in their specialty and so on. I know them all to be kind and devoted to students and hardworking and smart. But yeah, of course, you can see right away the difference here. The 2 women have ratings lower than 4. The 3 men have ratings above 4. I also note that the level of difficulty is above 3 for both women. One of the men has a level of difficulty of 3, but the other ones are lower than 3. I wouldn't really know how to, draw conclusions about this without looking at, of course, much more data than this, but it's just a little anecdotal evidence. Since I personally know all 5 of these individuals pretty well, it is surprising to note the difference in their ratings. Especially considering that on their face, I wouldn't judge them to be, that different as people. I don't know what they're bringing into the classroom, to be fair, but as people, they seem to be pretty similar in engagement and dedication and devotion to their students. So just a little anecdotal evidence to add to the the pile of evidence that keeps mounting up that women are simply scored lower in ratings, in numerical ratings.
Women are scored lower. Women are attacked personally more. Women have less of a chance of success. And we have to work really hard to still be a kind person and present ourselves as kind and welcoming and all the things, while still holding students to a high standard that should be expected when you're in college. I love my job. Yes, I work really hard at it. Yes, sometimes it feels like walking a tightrope or walking on eggshells, trying to figure out exactly how to teach students in a way that they feel that I'm kind and that I'm welcoming and that I'm approachable, but still holding them to a high standard. That's a tightrope, and it's a challenge, and it's a continuous challenge that I feel probably is most specifically laid at the feet of women professors. That is for sure. I wish that I didn't have this fear that my student evaluation scores will once again someday land me unemployed. I wish that wasn't a fear in my life, But at the same time, I'm so lucky to be in this position. I feel like I'm a useful person, that I'm contributing to society by ensuring that our future healthcare practitioners have a good science basis. And I'm grateful for the work. You know, yes, it's challenging, but I'm grateful, and I hope that I can continue to do this at least for a few more years. But yeah, I'm grateful for the work. I love my job. I love my job. Let's let's end it there.